Okay, let's start with section 8.3. So let me just explain a couple of things. So 8.3 is simple interest. So we're going to be talking a lot about money, obviously, and interest. And there's different types of interest. There's simple interest, and then there's compound interest. But we're going to be discussing simple interest first. So to calculate simple interest, it's just I equals PRT, and in the book they don't have the dots, but that means you're multiplying P times R times T. Okay, so what is PR and T? Well, first of all, what you're calculating is going to be the amount of money, right, that we get paid, okay, either for lending or investing money, or that we pay for borrowing money. So when we borrow money, right, there's an interest that you're going to be asked to pay, or interest that you earn when you deposit money in the bank. Now your P is going to be the amount of money that we deposit or that you borrow. So if you borrow, $2,000 loan, right, that's going to be your P, or you deposit $2,000. Your R, right, is going to be your interest rate. And the rate, really varies from bank to bank, depending wherever you go. And usually we want to express it. It's usually expressed as a percentage, but we write it as a decimal, which isn't too bad to change. T here, and T here is going to be in terms of years, which I didn't write it in. So years, and I make that a little bit smaller, my font. Okay, and let's see, finally, again, this is the same thing as your I, but your simple interest involves interest calculated only on the principal. Okay, and we'll talk about that as we go, and then definitely when we get into compound interest. Okay, so these are our quantities. So let's just do a simple example, no pun intended, to calculate simple interest. So let's just say you want to deposit $2,000, right, in a savings account. So you want to deposit $2,000, right, in a savings account. And the bank is paying a rate of 6%. So the rate is 6%. So you want to find the interest at the end of the year. So find interest at, end of year. Okay, so we want to find the interest. Well, the interest, by definition, is the principal times the rate times the time. Okay, well, the principal is what we start with, right? That's $2,000. Times the rate. Well, the rate is 6%, but 6%, we want to write it as a decimal, is 0.06, right? Because the decimal is really here, and we're just dividing by 2. And so our decimal's there, and we add a 0. So that's 0.06. And we want to find the interest at the end of 1 year. So my T is just 1. And just, you don't have to multiply this by hand unless you want to, but this is just 2,000 times 0.06, right? The times 1 doesn't really matter. You could, anything times 1 is the same thing. So we end up getting 120. Well, 120 what? Well, dollars. So after a year, after 1 year, we earned $120, right? Not too bad, right? So how much do we have in the bank as right now, right? So in our savings account, right, after, right, 1 year later, right? Well, we started with $2,000 and we ended up with 2,000, well, let's just write out 2,000 plus $120, right? Which is not bad for having your money just sit there. And so we're left with, all right, we just add these up, right? So 21, right? $2,120. So hopefully that makes sense, right? Simple interest just multiply P times R times T. Now, what if I wanted to leave this money in? What about after 2 years? Right? What if I wanted to leave it in for 2 years? Well, the interest would be, again, so P times R times T. Well, it's still $2,000. My rate is still 6%, but now it's 2 years, right? Or in other words, 24 months. So if we punch that in our calculator, we're going to get 240, right? Or in other words, $240. And so, again, that's our interest. Well, again, we started with $2,000, but, 2 years later, so let's say, right, this is 1 year, 1 year. So two years later, we're going to end up with $2,240, right? And, I mean, hopefully you can see, after maybe, what if it was after 3 years, right, without calculating, or after 4 years, right, how much interest would you generate? Well, notice your 240, right, it was just 120, right, let's see, here we earned $120, and another year would be $120, and that's where we got our, right, 240, so in 3 years, we'd probably get 120 plus 120 plus 120, right? So we'd probably end up with $360. After 4 years, right, probably be $480, right? Again, this is 120 plus 120 plus 120 plus 120, right, for each year. So that's the idea behind simple interest. And notice that we started with, in this example, right, $2,000. So that was our original amount, our principal, and we added our interest, right, to see how much we earned, right? Or you can think about this, you can also think about borrowing, right? If you borrowed $2,000, right, and a year later, right, you would owe the bank, you would be paying probably payments, but $2,120. But it's original amount plus the interest, so principal plus interest. So let's keep that in mind. So we had, again, if we want to write it again, 2,000, right, plus, let's go ahead and just, this is good to write it out actually. Let's make this green. So 120, or we had, so 2,000 plus plus. So after 2 years, 240. After 3 years, right, 360, and so forth. So here is our principal P, right, and here is our interest, right, that we generated, right, and of course we get 2,120, 2,240, and 2,360, right? Here, if after 1 year, after 2 years, and after 3 years. So we get P plus I, right? And this was our, we can call this maybe our, it's a value, but it's a future value, right, that you earn, or again, that you're going to pay back. So P plus, well, what's I? I was P times R times T, so I can replace I with P times R times T. Now, if we get P times R times T, what do these guys have in common? There's a P, so I can factor out a P, right? And P times 1 is P plus RT, right? Distributive property. P times 1 is P. P times RT is PRT. So this guy ends up being our future value for when your interest is, when you're working with simple interest. So again, they call actually this amount big A, okay, which is called a future value, right, of a loan, for example. and the principal P, which we use, can also be thought of as the present value. So again, just present, right? It's our principal, but present value, right? How much you presently have. Okay, so let's just do a quick example of finding the future value for simple interest. Okay, so let's say you have, let's call this example 2. Okay, so let's say you're going to take out a loan, and the loan is going to be for $1,060, and you are going to, so a loan of 1060, and the rate is going to be, in order to borrow this loan, the rate is going to be 6.5%. Okay, and you're going to borrow it. You're going to borrow this money for 3 months. So you want to find the loan's future value. So we want to find the A, right? Which is the loan's future value, right? So they're lending you 1060 for 3 months, right? But you're going to pay them back with interest, right? Because they let you borrow the money. Okay, so let's use, well, our future value formula is simply A equals P times the quantity 1 plus R to the T. Now remember, this guy is just P plus PRT. So if you want to use this, that's fine. If you want to use this expression, that's fine too. Whichever, makes sense to you. It really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to, well, let's just go ahead and plug in our values. So our P is, okay, so I'm borrowing 1060. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one. So 1060, so maybe circle or square that. 1060 times the quantity 1 plus, what's our rate? Our rate is 6.5%, but this is we want it as a decimal. So we want to move, right? We want to divide by 100, so it's going to be 0.065, right? This is still percent because it has a percent sign. So I have 0.065, and let's see, maybe put parentheses, and times the time. Well, how long am I borrowing this for? It's 3 months, but remember this guy is in years. So 3 months, well, there's 12 months, right, in a year. So that's just 3/12, or if you want to write a fourth. So 1060 plus 1 plus 0.065, right, and that's really times a quarter, or if you want to write 0.25. And then you just punch this in your calculator. All right, I'm going to put in 1060 times, and I'm currently putting in, that's really 0.25. So I'm punching in 0.25 times 0.065 in my calculator, and I get 0.01625, but I'm going to add 1 because I'm adding this 1. So I end up getting this guy, but then I'm going to multiply that by 1060. So I end up getting this value, so 225. And so I borrowed 1060, but how much, right? I mean, I'm paying with interest, so how much am I going to owe? Well, $1,077, right? And you want to probably round to the hundredths, right, to the nearest cent. So it's probably going to be $1,077.23, right? This changes this guy. So that's our future value. So this is our principal, right, plus our principal plus our interest, right? That's what this guy represents, right? How much you're going to pay back with interest. And I mean, if you take this guy and you subtract, right, this guy minus our 1060, right, you'll get about $17.23, right? So you're paying back, right? I mean, that's not too bad, 17 bucks for borrowing 1060. You're just paying 17 extra dollars. So that is future value for simple interest.